Chapter 11. Those Who Wish to Hide. Weaponized autism, the focused application of nerdiness, computer tech savvy, and social awkwardness in the cyber pursuit of justice, payback, or even serving the public interest. Barry Soetoro. Some days are too beautiful to waste. Melo Romanov knew this all too well. It was a combination of the day's beauty and an internal prodding he couldn't put into words that caused him to forego his usual routine and instead take a hike among the mountains facing the Sea of Marmara. Istanbul sits between the Black Sea and Marmara, separated by a river acting as a sort of boundary, keeping Europe from connecting to Greater Turkey by the barest of margins. The city faces south and west, with the mountains behind along the Black Sea. Mellor's place of employment was a textile facility a mile or so down from the foothills on the mainland Turkey side. He worked in the back of the facility, under the table as it were, where there was always ample work for him. Like a cat, he came and went as he pleased, though these days he tended to put in the hours if for no other reason than the associated routine. Mellor's final resources in his escape from Las Vegas were gradually depleted as he made his way in and through a dozen countries, using varying means discovered the hard way over the years. Lastly, he secured untraceable lodgings and work on his terms through the well-placed bribe of a facilities manager and a deft demonstration of skills he occasioned to acquire in Japan before, for all intents and purposes, he had died. Certainly, the corpse they thought was Mellor wasn't, but that was the idea. So Mellor did honest work now, and received honest pay, the only hint of criminality being his invisibility to the local government. He maintained a nugget of resources for emergencies, and added to it as he slowly expanded what limited equity he could keep. He kept a low profile, and it worked, but today was a day to take a hike. The air was brisk, the scenery pristine, the views on the Sea of Marmara spectacular, and it all struck him as something out of a dream for a few moments as he walked along. He came to a bench overlooking the city and sea, sat, and when the sun finished fading into distant hills, made his way back. In an indescribable way, he felt as though he just made transit through an invisible door and a new season awaited. He couldn't define the feeling, but he remembered similar premonitions, usually when something big was going to happen. Then he noticed the Russians. It was how they staked out his room that gave them away. Essentially, nobody owned a car in that neighborhood, and the local authorities, they would just as soon leave the ramshackle buildings to their small-time crime lords. This was the sort of neighborhood Mellor understood. So he understood that any sort of vehicle meant something amiss. And knowing those who lived about him, he also knew he was the most likely person who could draw such attention. He spied the vehicle from a distance, along his regular route home from the textile facility. Mel did everything on foot these days. He had motorcycles stashed somewhere safe, but he only checked on it. He never used it. Coming from the mountains back down into the city brought him along a route that showed the car's trunk peeking over a gentle rise. Otherwise, coming home from work, he would have turned the corner right into them. Even from a distance, Mellor could tell the car's make and that it rolled off a factory line in Russia. He continued casually forward, crossing the street diagonally onto a branching footpath and not turning to approach his building. There were many passerby. He was far from remarkable. They were in all variety of costume, tinged with local Muslim tradition. His long trousers, sleeved shirt, and boots fit right in. Mellor always made an effort to be invisible, so he didn't look noticeable as he made his way to a clutch of shops across the street from his building and took a table in a coffee shop with a view on the car. It stayed there for hours, and he saw one of the men get a sandwich. A large fellow, and about as Slavic as they come. "Green Kolya's crew," Mellor muttered, and sipped his coffee. Turkish coffee. Certainly a delight. There was that, at least. It was good he didn't follow his normal routine. they would have taken him at the textile facility. Or caught him coming home. That sixth sense. Should he hightail it or find a way to mitigate his losses? The last several years were uncomfortable, if sparse and a bit lonely. He did not relish the idea of starting from scratch yet again. He was just getting the hang of Turkish. He hadn't reached a decision when a man got out of the car holding a yellow envelope, walked through the courtyard, and stuck it in the mail slot of his unit. Then the man sauntered back to the car, and they drove off. Mellor tapped his fingers on the table, then decided. He contacted the landlord of his building, another of those locals made friendly with bribes. He offered $100 US if the man would pick up a letter from Mellor's mail slot and deliver it to where he was in the coffee shop. The landlord lived two units down and was always home. At first the old man balked, but then agreed before hanging up. Mellor met him at the entrance to the coffee shop and shook hands with him, leaving a portrait of Ben Franklin behind, then grabbed the envelope from the landlord's other hand and quickly disappeared. His motorcycle was in a storage unit a mile away. There were also gloves and a gas mask there, which he donned before opening the envelope. Thankfully, it contained no white powder or anything else remarkable, save a private link to an internet address printed on the back of a business card. On the other side of the card were a username and a passcode. There was also a thumb drive. He plugged the thumb drive into an old laptop he kept in the storage container, one with no web connectivity. Said drive required a password that had not been made available, so the username and password on the card were only for the web address, not the drive. Mellor exhaled percussively. He would need to go examine the link on the web itself to unravel this mystery. That would expose him to whoever was hosting the link, and that was definitely Green Kolya. Well, it couldn't be helped. He'd just have to stay wary. Mellor made his way to an internet cafe on the motorcycle. There he donned a pair of corded headphones provided by the cafe, entered the URL, started a timer on his burner phone, kept an eye on both the front and back door of the place, he parked the bike out back, and opened the link. Through the username and password gate was a window for a video. There was no image. It was just a black square against the white square of the web portal. Mel clicked the video. "You're a sneaky little bastard," Green Kolya began in Russian. The black square became his wide, grinning face. The video was from the perspective of a computer's camera on a desk. Green Kolya looked old. He wore a black sweater and no hair. He was a man who might be thought fat, but was not. He was instead solid and ruthless. He had large lips and a wrinkled, bald head, the only hair on it thick gray eyebrows. Kolya knit those brows together as he looked at a drink in his hand, took a sip, replaced it on the desk, and continued, "The thing is, I need this sneaky little bastard. It was only incidentally that we found out you were alive in Las Vegas. Certainly, in your position, I would have done the same as you and disappeared again. Though I'm sure you know you were merely a collateral item to our main purpose in that casino. It's irrelevant now, of course. You were saved by a miracle, Mellor. But the man who came through the hole in the world with that sick kitten, well, he has connected us all in something. So now you're in Turkey. We did have a devil of a time tracking you down, but ISK Intel recalled you worked textiles in Japan when that shed blew up with you in it. Only the body they identified wasn't yours, was it? I got it from med school, Mellor chuckled to himself. I don't need to know where you found the corpse, Green Kolya continued, almost as though he heard, though he couldn't have. The video was pre-recorded. But you did a good job. You led us there. And right when we found you, boom! I've got to hand it to you. We were surprised to find you still running around getting up to mischief when we planned our operation in Las Vegas. You know, if that game went different, I might not have killed you, Mellor Romanov. But again, it is the past, irrelevant now. Now, here is our situation. Before you cleared out that safe and ran to Japan 23 years ago, there was no other squad, no other contact, no other group, no other source that I could find who could get in and out of North Korea like you. I don't know how you do it. I would like to know. If you're looking at this video, I expect I will not know, as it means you have evaded the greeting I arranged for you. And so you are now looking at our secondary measures to initiate a meeting. How good for you. Definitely, if I have you or I get you, I will know your methods, because Melor, none have been able to do what you did in Korea. Good, Melor mumbled. Green Kolya took a long drink in the video. I know you felt cheated in your idealistic emotional youth. Still, you can't steal because of emotion. We all must earn our way, Melor. No one simply graduates into stature. Of course we have to kill you if we find you now. Of course we do, Melor. You've left us no choice. That is, unless... Here he exhaled. Unless you're compelled by what's on this thumb drive I'm giving you. Now I'm going to provide you password, but you've got to hear me out first. I'll start with the goodies, Melor. If you pull this off, your head is clear. You come back home, live honestly, live dishonestly, whatever. Just stay out of our way and nobody will kill you. Furthermore, to sweeten the deal and show my true gratitude, 1 million US, no questions, yours. You take it away from me, I'm tired of looking at it, okay? Plus, and here, this is the dessert. I don't kill your daughter. Melor felt his eyebrows stiffen. Surprised? Sure you are. Well, and the twist, you know, Yami. Yes, we know about Yami. That's how you hid from us so long in Japan. But you know your Yami, she had your little girl in her, Melor. Oh, about 2 months along. What you'll find on this drive I've given you is evidence to that end. Pictures we scoured from the web of Yami in maternity clothes, the time and place of birth, all that. You'll forgive us if we keep the identity of your daughter from you. You're so resourceful, Melor. You would certainly track her down otherwise. So we have kept her identity secret. And in fact, we have gone to the trouble of giving her a tour of Russia over the last several days. Provided you do what I'm going to ask, well, there just won't be any issues. She'll have a nice vacation, you'll get money, and we'll leave you be in perpetuity. The details of what I need you to do are in the thumb drive as well. Now, you look those things over. I'm about to give you the password. Before I do, several things. One, we expect the deal with the North Koreans to go sideways. We expect to double cross. And we intend to double cross them first. Thus, the value of your capability in this enterprise and the great pains I've endured to recruit you. Two, as you must have no doubt suspected, this will be a very difficult undertaking indeed, and I would not be surprised if you decided it were beyond you entirely. In that scenario, I'm sure you'll be able to spirit yourself away to some other country and disappear in a factory until another 5 years have elapsed and your past catches up to you again. This will be quite unfortunate. However, as it will mean your innocent daughter will have to be the scapegoat for your enemies, as she certainly will not be fit for return to Japan after we've abducted her. I doubt very much that the Yamaguchi Gumi would appreciate a granddaughter being either abducted or liquidated or sold if someone has the coin. So in that event, we will be forced to dispose of her privily. I hope you understand. Whether by sale or expiration, I cannot yet say. At any rate, look at this sheet of paper and write down the numbers, letters, and symbols you see. You will give access to the drive through these. If you do decide to take my more than generous offer, then please contact me however you see fit, and we'll arrange the details. Green Kolya held up a bit of paper that said S0 OKA capital D O0R at symbol K. Suka Durok, which means, roughly translated, bitch fool. Then the video ended. Mellor would have smirked and made a quip, but the news about a daughter and the idea Green Kolya kidnapped her did something to diminish his jocularity. He wrote down the password and returned to the storage unit to explore the thumb drive. Indeed, it proved the veracity of their claim to his fatherhood. This news was a rolling emotional thunder to him. It wasn't quite sinking in, and it made him feel a sort of broken nostalgia. He certainly didn't expect to get any money from Green Kolya. He wondered if they actually had his daughter. The pictures provided did not show her face. Such images were pixelated, and there were no images of her that were new. Most were from her childhood. Kolya also provided redacted hospital records indicating her time and place of birth. These items and other varying facts he could remember about that time in his life made it so Mellor pieced together the truth of the matter, which finally drove the reality home to him. He did indeed have a daughter somewhere. And if Green Kolya knew this much about her, well, maybe he had her, maybe he didn't. Then Mellor took time to examine what they wanted him to do. There were schematics to a building about the size of a large department store, but elongated, and when he realized it was the state mausoleum in Pyongyang, North Korea, he had to stand back from the computer and let loose a number of expletives, eyes nearly jumping out of his head. Kolya's mind has escaped his body and wandered off, Mel muttered. Some gem of a cube was on top of the grave of one of North Korea's supreme dictators. It was being kept there for PR and political reasons, and it probably wouldn't stay long. Green Kolya wanted Mellor to use his network to sneak into North Korea and steal it, and he had to do it within several days. 11 days from the time Mellor received the envelope. Green Kolya was supposed to buy the cube from North Korea in just 11 days. The notes on the drive further clarified Kolya's suspicion of a double cross, and having dealt with the North Koreans himself, Mellor conceded such a thing certainly seemed likely. It all fit nicely, but the logistics of it. There were some 200 miles, maybe 300, from Mellor's cave to Pyongyang on the far southwest of the country. That was going to be hard mileage. And how was he supposed to get in and out of the country's memorial building? The place was going to be absolutely thick with goose-stepping party stormtroopers, and the North Koreans were rabid in security. There was no way he could get in there unless... Well, Mellor did know some people. He looked at the documentation on his daughter. She was 22, headed to 23, probably quirky like Yami, a handful. Mellor smirked at the thought of it and was suddenly very sad. Finally, he exhaled, knowing what he had to do. Mellor bought minutes for his burner phone at a gas station and made his way to a place where he could disappear 10 different ways if his signal were tracked. He called the green line, and Kolya picked up. "You sneaky bastard," he said. $1 million, and you don't kill some 20-something I've never heard of. And we don't keep an open hit out on you. Aha, Mellor said. Here's the thing, you fat dog. I need 100 large up front for expenses. I haven't used my network in a long time. You think I'm just going to slide right in like they're waiting for me? 100 large, U.S. currency. So what, you can disappear? No chance, you puffed up hooligan. No chance, huh? I did my homework, Kolya. Korea is flexing on you through the Yakuza already. That's what you didn't say in your video, isn't it? That's the other reason you sent those poor boys in the sedan to smoke cigarettes like homing beacons on the street where nobody owns a car. This about the Yakuza was purely a bluff from Mellor, but it was also probably true if his memory of international mob relations were correct. North Korea's economy intersected with all adjacent criminal enterprises. No good help these days, Kolya muttered. What are you whining about, old man? Quit your whinging. You juggle billions. 100 grand is nothing. It's literally pocket change. You blow 100 grand if you decide to have a weekend somewhere, and that just on the call girls. If I disappear, you'll spend less than 100 large finding me and have the satisfaction of your revenge. How do I give it to you? You leave it where I tell you and stay out of my way. 75. 120. That's not how this works. Just let the pennies go and quit pinching. They cry in agony. I'll tell you when and where. And if it's short or it doesn't show up, you'll never see or hear from me again. You'll never meet your daughter then. Maybe, maybe not. Mellor shrugged. His tone did a good job hiding how this actually made him feel. In fact, he even lied to himself a little, as deep down this business about a daughter he didn't know drove Mellor more than he could have expressed if he wanted to. Mellor Romanov, if you double-cross me in this, I won't just kill you. I'll keep you alive while I have your organs removed and prepared for me as a feast for you to watch me savor. Do you understand? Not really, you bottom-feeding digestive tract, but your meaning's clear. Always so interesting to chat, Green Collier. And Mellor tossed the phone down a drain, then rode off into the night. Jimcast in Real Life, or Jimcast IRL, was the live podcast of Jim Jacuzzi, who rode waves of internet culture coming into shore around 2010. After almost 20 years doing regular online shows and putting in the hard work, he and his retinue were serious commentators on tidings of the world and often featured a diverse menagerie of guests providing in-depth, intelligent perspectives on all manner of subjects. Paul and Katya Laumer were recently featured in a taping of the new show in front of a paying audience, an increasingly common event for Jimcast IRL. A big reason Paul and Katya were brought onto the program was that their channel had been entirely erased from the internet several years before, forcing them to find different means of getting their message out. The result was a total reorganization of their personal lives away from such media, but their message was something Jim Jacuzzi was interested in, and for good reason. As out there as it sounded, more and more experiences like theirs were coming to describe not only the cultural zeitgeist, but the political landscape and day-to-day life generally. Iteration upon iteration of swift change was fast impacting a generation, and that generation was hungry for the truth the media sought to hide. Personalities like Jim Jacuzzi grew too big to turn off like a switch. Paul and Katya weren't quite there yet. The segment that got repeated in clips across social media and went somewhat viral involved Paul Laumer explaining what actually happened with his and Katya's channel. He was an average-looking fellow with blue eyes, a neatly trimmed beard, and an aura of new dad. They sent me a strike for something about the vaccines. I don't even know what. You don't even know what it was, Jim reiterated. No. Like they didn't give you a timestamp or an email with a link to the video showing where exactly you allegedly broke their terms of service. Nothing. I just got a strike and was locked out of my account. Before I could post any videos or change anything else, 2 weeks later, the whole account was deleted. It had quadrupled my traffic in like half a year. Katya and I have things to say people want to hear. But, Katya spoke up. She was a slim girl with auburn hair, high Russian cheekbones, pale eyes, and a delicate beauty limned in motherhood. It's not politically correct. So, thought police. We had to change everything, Paul continued. It was like the revenue was just gone, dried up immediately. Dude, you should sue, Jim said. Jim, sorry, said Katya. We have looked into, but a lawsuit, years, expensive. What about an attorney operating from a firm that specifically takes on such cases pro bono? I know half a dozen guys. I'd love to hook you up after the show. We're open to it, Paul acknowledged. But I'll admit, I don't know that God is leading us that direction. We've been blessed. The RV we were in, its value went up very high in the last decade, depending on where we drove it. We found a good market, sold the thing, and I built a tiny home right here in West Virginia. Not that far from you, as you know. Yes, Jim chuckled, but I'm never letting you barbecue again. I never said I was a cook. What do you and Katya do now, if you don't mind my asking? We are book resellers, Katya answered. Online. God blessed us enough. We have more than enough to keep chickens and little Alex. Hi, Alex. Be good for Natalie. She's babysitting Jim. Hi, Natalie. Katya waved at the cameras. Anyway, we'll look at those lawyers, but I think I think we're just using this opportunity to reinvent ourselves, Paul finished. See, what's crazy about this, Paul and Katya, is that you're not the only ones. That's why you might want to think about legal action because, and Jim went on to enumerate several dozen other examples of content creators getting the axe in the video. That particular snippet from the larger show ended after about 5 minutes and was shared everywhere. Paul and Katya, now residents of West Virginia, lived across the state from Jim Jacuzzi's broadcast studios and the town where live events were held in a repurposed opera house. In the coming days, Paul would wonder if he were wrong to mention he and Katya now had a home in West Virginia. He never said just where. It was a big state. There were lots of mountains, and poverty after the coal boom went bust made proper record-keeping less than common. They were a half-hour's drive from Parkersburg along the Ohio border. Meanwhile, Jim Jacuzzi was about the same drive away from Washington, D.C. on the state's far eastern end. So Paul Laumer had not narrowed down where was the little 500-square-foot tiny home they built off in the woods. And you couldn't see the gravel road to the property very well from the 2-lane highway that gave access. There weren't any signs. You had to know there was something there. It didn't seem like a huge mistake. Even so, Katya phoned him with a tone of voice that she only used in the highest emergency. Paul, Alex and I want to get ice cream. And are you still in the bookshop? Paul looked up from the McDonald volume he was leafing through. Yeah, 2 buildings down. He cradled the smartphone with his shoulder until he could put the book away. There's some kind of Asian man. I think we are followed. Is he in the shop with you? No, he's sitting at outdoor tables. Let me, you have the car keys, right? Yes. Let me get where I can see him out the window. Paul went to the front of the bookshop and looked out, 2 shops down where his wife and son were. There was the guy back to him looking at a smartphone. There was a side exit to the bookshop. Paul took it and scrambled around to an alley 1 more shop over. Get ready, Katya. I'm going to catch him. Hold on, 1 more second. He peeked around the corner, looked out in the parking lot where the minivan was parked, then got back to the side where he could see the exit of the outdoor area in front of the ice cream shop. He had a little .38 in a secreted holster. He unholstered it and put it in his jacket pocket, made sure he had a good grip. He could get a shot off from the pocket if he had to. Paul, Katya said, and Paul could hear her fussing over Alexei, the toddler just turned 4 several months ago. Paul exhaled and said, all right, go, and he hung up. Katya and Alex walked out of the ice cream shop and right past the man heading toward the minivan another 100 feet away. The man waited a moment, then put his phone in his pocket and stood turning to follow. Paul was in front of him in a second, putting the hand that wasn't in a jacket pocket to his chest. Who are you, Tojo? Why are you following my wife and kid? The man was Paul's height, wiry, and 20 years older. He took off a pair of sunglasses and smiled, bowing slightly. He had a thin beard and a keen look in his eye. So sorry. I am a big fan of you and your wife's work online. I wanted to say hello. So you followed my wife around? No. I happened to see her and I wondered, is that? Could that be? Who are you? Sorry, I am Kaido Yamada, retired inspector of Ehime Prefecture in Japan. He produced a business card. Yeah, I thought you might be Japanese. Paul looked to the minivan and saw Katya in the driver's seat. He waved her off. She would go home. He could get an Uber to give or have her pick him up later. Paul accepted the business card, looked at it briefly, pocketed it, and said, let's go have an ice cream. You said your name was Kaido? I almost called you Tojo again. Let's talk about you being a fan, Kaido. They went in and ordered an ice cream each. Kaido hardly touched his, but Paul was only too happy to indulge, though he circumspectly kept one hand in his jacket pocket under the table. He sensed something off about Kaido, but not necessarily in a malicious way. He didn't believe this runaround about him being a fan, though, that's for sure. Paul and Katya Larimer did make a splash on the internet, but that was years ago. Jim Jacuzzi only brought him on in a gesture of solidarity and to help make a point about censorship. There's no way Paul or Katya were going to run into a mad stalker-type fan in this part of the world. They just weren't that famous. So, Paul said, you came all the way from Japan only to see Katya and me. Mr. Lama, sir, you know, we might want to do this. And he held up his phone, popping off the back and removing the battery. Paul squinted, but couldn't find much of a flaw in that logic. He did the same, then showed Kaido a little pouch. You have one of these little things to block signal? I do. Okay. Cut to the chase. I know you're not a fan. Oh, I never should have mentioned what state I lived in online. What is it? Why are you following my family? Mr. Lama, have you heard of a man named Clever Ed? Paul slowly deposited his spoon in the stupidly delicious caramel butterscotch diabetes fodder in front of him. I might know a guy like that. The last time he had public news coverage, Mr. Lama, was in relation to you and to your wife. Paul leaned back and crossed his arms. So you're a fan after all. Maybe if I explain. Why don't you? I put the wrong man in jail several years ago, and he didn't kill the girl. Girl come back. Then she disappeared with the cat. The department defended me, but I had to resign. But then, you see, I learned some things about her father. Then a man, an Indian man. Ricky. Yes, Mr. Lama, that exactly. He comes from nowhere. And he brought up this Clever Ed. Uh-huh. And the group, calm. Yeah, listen, all right. What kind of spirituality you got, Mr. Kaido? Excuse me. You a Buddhist, you a Taoist, a Maoist, are you into Confucianism, Juche, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Scientology? What flavor are you, Mr. Kaido? Are you some stinking pagan? Paul resumed the spoon. The superstitious beliefs of the world, these are not mine, Kaido said mildly. Right, I figured. That's where you're at. Listen, I've seen some stuff and some things. The world we live in is out there, my friend. But we go about our routines in our zoo enclosures in our cities and don't see it. Then you have a supernatural experience. And what happens? Life goes by a few months and you totally forget about it until you're in trouble or it's the middle of the night. Everybody's like that. And most of us, we just don't want to admit the truth. There's some stuff out there that we flat don't understand. And ain't no bubble-headed, alien-breathing, lab-coated scientist will ever have an explanation for it all. You want to find Clever Ed? Well, you ain't gonna have an easy time of it. He's ex-FBI. Might have been the last one who was any good in the whole department. I don't know. He's ex-FBI. He wasn't out of the department when I knew him. I kept in touch a little. Couldn't tell you where he is now or what he's doing. I got an old business card from him I can scare up for you. It's not current, but listen, fella. This stuff, you go into it like a normie, you're going to get spanked. There's a God, Kaido. One. And there's a devil out there as well. And he's got his little chihuahuas all over the place. The devil has chihuahuas. Stooges, mooks, minions, goombas. Goombas. Yes, I've dealt with him before. And you know why I had to have this little sit-down with you? Kaido nodded, then screwed up his eyebrows. Did you really go to some other world? Yeah, I did. And the cat did it. Yeah, well, maybe somehow. That's what the going thought is. And then he puked. No, Blue never puked. I've seen some of the scary spaghetti stuff going around online about the portal cats and the hairballs, but that was never Blue. A scary spaghetti. That's what the kids are calling urban legends online these days. Anyway, Blue didn't retch. He might have just found the hole, not made it. He's never done it before. Could have been something in the forest. My angel thought it had to do with times and seasons and a number of different things. Katya and I are both basically without any family. I've got geriatric siblings somewhere, that's it. Part of why people go in and out of that place, they ain't got any connections. I know that. Loose connection to the ebb and flow of the world, being a bit unstuck in culture, that's a prerequisite. Your angel, Evangelion. Yeah, that's about right. Kaido said, and took a tentative bite of ice cream that was a lot more cream than ice by this point. Okay, Paul said, leaned forward and laced his fingers together. You know how much the sun burns every year? Kaido responded with an eyebrow. Paul said, 8.3 miles a year. That's how much it shrinks. That's how much its circumference goes down every year. 8.3 miles. So let's do some math. How many miles is an astronomical unit? You know, the distance from the sun to the earth. Mr. Lama. All right. It's 93 million. Now you just got to do the division, Mr. Kaido. What's 93 million divided by 8.3? Just about 11,205,000. Now, you know how many times that number goes into the age of the Earth, the 4.6 billion year old age of the Earth? Another math problem, Kaido. 410 times. The rate our sun burns if the world was over 11 million years old, our planet would have been inside the sun. Unless Kaido, unless something arrested the rate of burn, and the amount the sun shrinks every year isn't subject to any constant that can be measured or an average over time. See, this is vital, Kaido. If the sun's rate of burn isn't constant, then the intensity with which our planet has interacted with the sun through time is changed. That means you can't trust a lot of mechanism the priesthood of scientism use. Carbon-14, or C14 as they say, that's a radioactive isotope deposited from the sun to the earth through the atmosphere, absorbed by plants, eaten by animals. It's got a 5,000-year half-life, plus or minus, but its intensity and its presence, those are related to that of the sun. So by definition, based on what we know, it can't be a constant, accurate, reliable unit of measurement. Nothing can, really, because everything's always changing all the time, Kaido. The present cannot be the key to the past, as Charles Lyell said. Rather, it is the past that is the key to the present, you see, because the past is where the domino got knocked over that led to whatever you are today. That's where the wave of inertia started, in the past. So you can't look at how things are going now and project that over the distant past, because things are going different now than they were going then. But you know why they pretend they can look at today and predict yesterday? You should. You used to be an investigator. Why? Forensic science, Kaido. There's empirical operational science and forensic hypothetical science. And the one is used to hold up the other as a means of tricking people into believing something is established factually when it's only theoretical, hypothetical, and unprovable. You can see a bobcat become a house cat if you breed it right long enough. You can't see a house cat become an amoeba over billions of years. They use forensic science to fill the gap, and empirical science describing things we see today as a starting point. So they say, see, if a cat can get hairier living in the cold for a few generations, then it must have evolved from dirt. They do a bait and switch. Kind of like the flat earthers with Antarctica, or anything from that QAnon cult, or the Marxists who lettered in eco-terrorism before they started working at coffee shops. It really is all the same. All these folks set up an impossible standard as their primary evidence, then use rhetorical tricks to establish their straw men. The going scientific cosmology is basically just a substitution of Chronos, time, for Yahweh, God. That's all it is, Kaido, making the God of this age time. But Yahweh is timeless. He's outside time and space. And so is that place where the cats go. Paul picked up his ice cream cup and drained what remained. Then said, kind of. It's a lot faster there than here anyway. 2 minutes there is a day here. 24 hours there is like 2 years here. Kaido looked out the window and frowned. Until Paul said that bit about forensic science, he wasn't on board, but now he remembered the receipt his men planted, and Hotaru's years on death row. The dishonor of it. Knowing how people worked, especially in large organizational bodies like those determining scientific opinion. The more he thought about it, the more he felt a certain unease deep inside. Finally he said, well, what then? What do we do about that? What do I do about that, Mr. Lama? You think about it, and you think to yourself, of course everything didn't just come into existence for no reason. You think to yourself, gee, that applies to me. And when you realize that, you ask yourself, Should what I'm doing and what I'm about to do be something whoever painted this painting I'm in would like? Am I a good guy on this stage we call the world, or am I a villain? And if I'm not a villain, what kind of heroic stuff am I doing to prove it? Am I taking care of people, or am I taking care of me? Mr. Lama, so dramatic. I tell you what I am. A man looking for a missing woman and her father, so I can bring closure to an incredibly sensitive situation where I live. No more, no less. My mission, honor. You paid for a ticket to the USA, tracked me down through the internet, stalked my wife, and you're just resolving an issue at home for honor? I have a personal stake in the matter. I make a bad call. So it is repentance then. That's good. Okay. 1 minute. Paul ran off to the bathroom of the ice cream shop, prayed over a coin, flipped it, thanked God, then came back. Just testing. Here. He pulled out the only copy of Clever Ed's business card he still owned, until then taking up space in his wallet. Ed only contacts me if he wants to, and that once every year or two. Well, maybe a bit more often recently, but you can't get a hold of him unless he wants you to. So, good luck. I am a hound with a fox, Mr. Lama. I will find him. By way of explanation, I have seen the portal, Mr. Lama. I saw this Ed. He came through with a little cat. But I don't remember. Isn't that strange? You're doing your penance with this rogue investigation here, Kaido. But it ain't good works that gets you to heaven. Ah, yes, a Christmas Jesus. Paul smirked. Something like that. You should look into it. Kaido nailed neutrality. The world is changing. It's changing fast. And it might change big very soon. Katya and I, we've seen it. We tell what we've seen. What else can we do? Inspector Kaido, I don't wish you ill. But I'm going to go now. I'm going to disappear. And I don't want you to follow me. And I don't want to see you around my wife or... Looky here. And he pulled out the gun. His back was to the teenager behind the ice cream counter, and nobody else was in the shop by that time, so none but Kaido saw. Paul put it away just as fast. Now, I could have blown your guts out, Kaido. I didn't. My head's on straight. But I see you anywhere near my wife and kid again or my house without you made an appointment or got in touch with us in advance, buddy, I'll send you to meet Christmas Jesus whether or not you got your heart right. Kaido smiled and chuckled good-naturedly. Don't worry, Mr. Paul Lama, sir. This, he held up the business card, more than enough. Yeah, all right, well, good to meet you, Kaido. Sayonara. And Paul left the ice cream shop. Kaido remained until the little outlet was about to close, thinking. Finally, he rose from the table and made his way out. He would find the retired FBI man.